Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sisto Says, powered by Design 2147, a New York City zoning and code consulting firm. Today, I'm here with Bill Weidner of Keep My Gas.
Keep My Gas.
Keep My Gas.
Yep.
I love it.
Keep My Gas, LLC.
I love it. Well, Bill, pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, Sisto, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Good. So, Bill, we always talk about the power of networking as in charge of business development and marketing here at Design 2147. It's my job. It's what you do. And we met at a BizDevel event for the city of Yes. And we started chatting and we started talking a little bit about what you do, because that's what we do at networking. And you explained to me about something that's very integral. It's part of what we do, which is, entitlement, permits, code, zoning, and obviously always dealing with local laws. So that's how you and I got to meet for a short time, and here you are, a couple of weeks later.
And at the time you said, Bill, would you be on my podcast? And I said, well, of course I will, because I love being on a podcast.
And actually, I have my own.
I have my own. It's realty speak, not reality speak, because we know there's no reality in real estate, right? It's realty speak. But yes, Local Law 152 is one of the many local laws in the city of New York. And it is the periodic inspection of gas piping systems. That's what the law is.
So just to give the audience who's not familiar with it, so it's pretty amazing that we build a building, we put gas piping in, we pressurize it, we test it, and back in the day, to give away my age, they issued a blue card. And the blue card then went to Con Ed, and if you had the blue card, Con Ed sent somebody out, and they set a meter, and they turned it on, and you were good. And you were good pretty much forever. And lo and behold, at some point several years ago, the city said, wait a second, we got buildings that are, some of them are, that no one ever did new gas work, so everything is existing. They may have done a little repair here or there, but there was no system in place, hence Local Law 152, to retest your building on a cycle.
On a periodic basis. Every
Correct.
4 years, actually. And the impetus for the law, actually it's the Local Law 152 of 2016, the impetus for the law was the gas explosions in 2014 and 2015 on the Lower East Side and
Correct.
in Harlem, where there was a loss of life. And so the city council decided, we have to have something where people are going in, licensed master plumbers actually, right, are going in, and actually the Master Plumbers Council and the Plumbing Foundation and plumbers that were experienced with gas, and of course the city council were the ones that drafted the original law.
Correct.
And it was passed in 2016, but it didn't start to be enforced by the enforcement entity, which is the Department of Buildings,
Correct.
until 2020.
Correct.
Yeah. And that's why it happened.
Right. So here we are, right? You have gas coming in at a certain pressure. At some point, the pipes deteriorate. We get a leak. There's an explosion. And unfortunately, we have the situations that happen down in Chinatown, up in Harlem. And now, here you are. Explain the process, because you do something quite different than what plumbers do. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that, because usually someone gets this notice in the mail that says, hey, you need to do your elevator inspection. Hey, you didn't do this. Hey, you didn't. But there's also some local laws that the building department doesn't kind of remind you that you need to do this. So lo and behold, maybe a person who owns a 6-unit building in Brooklyn realizes they never did their gas test. So normally they would call their local plumber, and the local plumber would do the test, and the plumber's the plumber. But you created something that's pretty interesting, that yourself and your brother, you do the consulting part of it, and he does the actual inspection. And I think that's an incredible idea, because most people have no problem understanding that they need to do an inspection, but they don't understand the process, right? Oh, he's going to come, he does this little thing, he says yes or no, and it's done. No, no, no. We got to pressurize your building. We have to do these things. And what happens if I fail? Are they going to shut my gas off? It's the middle of the winter. How do I cook? How do I do? So take us through the thought process of actually understanding the law and creating a company to actually do both ends of it. Facilitate being, hey, I can help you with the process, and we can do the physical part.
A quick history, Sisto, is that in 2019, the late fall, something came across my desk, because I have the real estate background, and I get a lot of newsletters relating to local laws. And I saw, and I believe it was from the Rent Stabilization Association, which is now the New York Apartment Association. They merged with CHIP, which used to be the Community Home Improvement Project. But they had a newsletter, and in that newsletter, it said Local Law 152, gas piping inspections. So I knew my brother, licensed master plumber. Actually, he worked at Rikers for 25 years, and he did everything in Rikers as a plumber. He wasn't serving time there. He actually was. Yeah.
My cousin was in the. My cousin Joe was actually at Rikers, and he was a CEO, but he was in charge of. And construction.
And then who knows? My brother probably knew him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But he got his master plumber's license in the city of New York while he was there, and then after he retired, after 25 years, he had his own company already established. So I called him up and I said, Doug, what is this? He says, oh yeah, no, they're going to be requiring all these inspections. It's as of January 1st of 2020, which is a couple of months away at that point, and just like a bell went off in my head, and I said, you know what? I think this is going to be complicated, because local laws are complicated.
Well, everything with the city is,
right.
It's not that they make it complicated,
no, it just
but
is.
you're talking about millions of buildings.
Listen, what you do, right? You see it every day.
Every day.
Right. And so I said, you know what? We have to become experts at holding people's hands through this entire process. We have to create something where it's incredibly informative, and everything about Local Law 152 is available for free for people to look at and ask questions to us directly or get the answers on the website. And that's what we did. Now, you remember 2020.
It was chaos.
Yeah. So we were going to launch in March of 2020. We didn't launch until July. So this July will be 5 years old. And we launched, and because of and you talk about the power of networking, right? Because of some of our relationships in the real estate industry, we were given the opportunity to be exposed to their base of owners, and we got a lot of calls.
Right. So if you work with a management company and they own 8 buildings, they not only do they have the plumber who's going to do it, but you walk them through the process. You make sure it's done properly. You make sure that it's done correctly. You make sure that the city got what they needed for that building to be verified, that the test did happen and it passed or it failed, and you file an LAA to fix it right away and get the gas turned back on. So it gets complicated. It's easy when everything passes. It gets complicated when something fails.
Well, there's basically 3 things that can happen, all right? And I wouldn't necessarily use the terminology pass and fail. It's a safety inspection.
Correct.
And by the way, if there is something wrong, it's not a violation like there is in other cases, right?
Correct.
It's just a notification that you have something you need to fix. You have a certain amount of time to fix it, and we're going to help you do that.
Correct.
Right. So there were 3 things.
So it's really just you informing them that something is deficient. Right. It's not a violation.
So in the case of Doug doing the inspection, he goes, and there's 2 phases to the inspection. One is a handheld portable gas detector that he will use to check the common area of the building.
Right.
So in that 6 family that you talked about, right, he's going up and down the stairs, and it's not a pressure test, it's a gas detector. So he's trying to detect gas that's coming from the apartments. Now, that's never happened, but that's part of the scope of the inspection as per the law. So he does that, right?
That's what they want you to do. That's what you do.
Then he would go into the basement, typically where the gas utilization equipment is, and he will check the point of entry to gas service, all the exposed gas piping to and post the meters to where it goes into the risers. So just exposed gas piping. So you're not looking at any piping that's not exposed.
Right.
And he's checking that both visually and also with this
the
gas
meter.
detector.
Right.
Now I can give you some statistics. About 45% of the time, there's something that needs to be fixed, but it's not a difficult thing to fix. It's an easy thing to fix. And 55% of the time, everything was fine when we did the first inspection. Now, the second thing that could happen is something needs to be fixed. We noted on the GPS 1 form, there were 2 forms, and GPS stands for gas piping system. So the gas piping system 1 form is a report that the owner gets. And the gas piping system 2 is the certification that is filed with the Department of Buildings. And, you know, a lot of people, all your listeners know that we have something called DOB now.
Right.
It used to be DOB-BIS, but now
Right.
they're going to DOB now.
Where everything is virtual.
At this point, this is still not on DOB now.
Right.
There is a separate portal where these things get filed.
Because they didn't integrate it.
Right, they didn't, but they are going to integrate it.
Yeah.
And it's
Christmas
already
is coming, too.
It's already happening in a small way, and I'll point that out to you later. But they are going to integrate it. And what happens is we prepare that paperwork. Then Doug has to sign it with a wet signature, and he has to use his embossed seal.
Right.
And then we scan it, and then we send those forms to the owner, both of them, the 1 and the 2, but only the 2 gets filed with the Department of Buildings. So if there was nothing at the inspection, that gets filed, and they're done for 4 years. It's a 4-year cycle.
Right.
And if something has to be fixed, they have 6 months to fix it. The form says 120 days, but if you check another box, it gives you another 2 months. And most of the stuff, you can have 6 months to fix it, right? And then you get it fixed. And once it's fixed, then we fill out a subsequent GPS 2, and we check off the box that says everything's been corrected. And
This podcast is powered by Design 2147, a New York City-based code, zoning, and entitlement company. And we're back to the show.
now they're done for 4 years.
Right.
Right. Now, if something hazardous is noticed, and hazardous would be a very, very apparent illegal connection like existed in that building on the Lower East Side, right?
And there's a lot of
Right,
those.
right, okay. Or stage 3 or 4 corrosion
Right.
on the pipes.
I was just going to say corrosion's
Right,
a big
corrosion
one.
on the pipes.
And bad fittings that weren't supposed to be used, like couplings.
Well, I'm
and
actually going
things.
to get into that with you later because there's been a big change in that, and that's actually a very positive thing in terms
Because
of the way
back
the
in the
law.
day, I remember you
Yeah.
can only use certain kinds of fittings. You can only
Right.
use certain kinds of, you can't use, certain types of couplings for gas.
Right.
And a lot of people had non-licensed plumbers come in and touch their gas
Oh.
lines all over the
You-
place.
it's actually
Massive.
Yeah. So the and then the third thing that could happen. So we talked about the blatantly illegal connection, which actually we haven't seen. All right, a stage
Corrosion.
3 or 4 corrosion or a gas leak.
Or an actual leak.
Right.
Right.
Now, if you see something that's hazardous, imminently hazardous at that moment, which those things would encompass, you got the licensed master plumber, as
Supposed
per, he's got to call a utility.
Right.
And if it's a gas leak, he's got to call 911.
Right.
And I can't tell you, not very many times. Only 5% of the time have we had to call the utility.
Wow.
And
Well, that's still
out of
5.
all the ones that we've done, right? And only 4 times out of all the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of buildings that we've done that Doug has inspected,
They've shut it.
was there a interruption in gas service.
Yeah.
And only 2 of them out of those 4 had a full interruption in gas
Oh, wow.
service. So a lot of people are really worried about doing this because they think that someone's going to come and shut their gas off.
But if it's really dangerous, they will. But if not, they won't.
Right. And don't you want to know you have a
I was just about to say.
I mean,
that just makes
Doug
no
went
sense.
into a couple where, and we're not there to check carbon monoxide, but the carbon monoxide was off the chart. I mean, he had to leave the space quickly because he was starting to get dizzy. And thank heaven we were there that
Right,
day.
because that's a flu problem or,
Right.
or a make-up air problem or whatever it might be.
It could have been disastrous, all right, if someone
Correct.
went down there, spent too much time, and lost their life, right? So while people sometimes say, hey, this is a pain that I have to do this, and it's another expense. And of course, we understand that because it's expensive to run a building in the city of New York because there's a lot of compliance that you have to deal with.
They keep adding more and more things on.
They keep adding. But I always say to people, don't you want to know that your building is safe?
Of course.
Yeah, and they say, yeah, you're right, I do.
Right. Exactly. I think to stay on that point for a minute though, Bill, is like right now, there's a new local law about parapets.
Parapets, yes.
And then there's the facade.
Right.
And then there's the gas.
Right.
And the bigger buildings who own a lot of real estate, they understand it.
Right.
They don't like that they're constantly, but the smaller 3-family homeowner, they feel like they're constantly getting hit with things.
Right.
And I can understand that. My dad was an Italian immigrant, bought homes in Astoria, Queens, and he would get those papers and he couldn't read them and he would get anxiety and he would ask me to read them. And I was like, it's another paper from the city, another
Right.
rule. So I can understand that in your world, it's easy to perceive, Bill must work with all management companies and they understand and they know. But that's not true because there's a lot of people in Brooklyn, in Queens, in Staten Island, in Manhattan. They don't own these big buildings.
Right.
They own a 4-family house or they own a 3-family house.
And we've done a lot
and
of
I was
3,
about
4, 5, 6 family, 8 family, 10 family.
They get nervous.
And a lot of people live at these homes.
Right, they get nervous.
Yeah, they live at these homes.
And that's what I really enjoyed talking to you the other night about it, is that your job is to be the nurse. Your job is to hold their hand and say, don't worry,
Right.
this will be okay. And that's what that's what I do.
Right.
That's what you do.
Yeah. Well,
but you do the technical part, which is your brother doing the inspection.
Right.
But you're the guy that's saying, don't worry, we got your back. We
Right.
can help you. We can make you comfortable. And no, the odds of them shutting your gas is minimal. But if we get to that point, you should thank us, not be angry at us.
Right. And I always say to people, I like to tell them the 3 things that can happen. And,
Sure.
and then I give them the statistics that I gave you previously. And I say to them, chances are it's not going to, but I want you to be aware that it could. So if it does, you're not surprised.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And then of course some people, you give them the bad news, right? You got to fix this or you got to fix that, or we had to call the utility, whatever it happens to be. And they're upset, but they're not really upset at you. They understand. And you know what? If you have stage 3 or 4 corrosion, which requires the plumber to call a utility because he can't make that determination, and we've had the utility come down and say, you know what? It's not 3 or 4.
It's 2.
It's 2.
Right. You're okay, but
Right.
you got to repair it soon.
Right. But now we have that information. Right.
And you would think that when you put these things and you mesh them together with your insurance companies and all those things, insurance companies must love it. Because a licensed professional is going to do a visual inspection of their gas
Right.
piping, which could blow up their building, kill lives, them having to pay out. It just makes sense. There are local law. Listen, I'm a big proponent of the facade inspections. A really dear, colleague of mine, Erica Tishman, passed away several years ago in Manhattan, working as an owner's rep while she was walking to her job on Halloween
I remember
morning.
that. I remember
and
that.
a brick killed her.
Yeah.
In this world now, with drones, with vibration eliminators, with all the technology, AI, everything we got, every building should know that their building has a problem. Whether it's gas, whether it's water, whether it's bricks, technology has come so far to help us. Right? So, we did a newsletter recently about, starting next month, about there has to be gas detection now within so many feet of every open
Local
flame.
Law 157, the gas detectors,
Right.
yes.
Again, people are going to complain. It's buzzing. If that thing buzzes, leave your apartment.
Right.
Right? How many people get smoke detectors and just cover them up or disengage them.
Right,
Right.
take the battery out.
Take the battery out. And, I have some apartments, I've had tenants do that all the time, and I get angry at them. These laws are there to
Right.
protect you, they're not there to hurt you. So we just finished talking about gas piping and inspections. Now we're talking about Local Law 157 that I did a whole article on about that is going to be enforced next month. And you'd be amazed at how many people write back into the newsletter that says, thank you, I really wasn't aware that this pertained to me, but you enlightened me to go to the section and read it, right? And we're not talking about homeowners, we're talking about architects, engineers, that maybe just it slipped by.
So, with respect to what you just said, right, in terms of notification and people understanding what it is that they have to do, I always say to people, subscribe to buildings at the Department of Buildings newsletter.
Correct.
They have a
That's
newsletter.
what we do, like
right?
everybody. Where do you think we get
right,
our information from?
Right. And also go to their service updates on the website, and they're all archived.
Right.
So
You can
could
see the past, and you can see-
you can go back, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is, and read them every month and see what they say. Because if you're a building owner, it's your responsibility to understand what's going on.
Right. They're not going to
Right.
come knocking on your door and
And
saying,
you know what? You may get a notice in the mail and ignore it or not see it. You may get an email and it might go into your spam.
Right.
You have to be proactive and make sure that and of course I consume all that information because I want to be able to update the website when something new happens. So I just want to share a couple of distinctions with you about Local Law 152 and how it's changed from the beginning to where it is now. So you'll remember I said it was a 4-year cycle.
right.
And that started in 2020. And the first 4 years was 2020 to 2023. And during that 4 years, only 45% of the people that were supposed to comply complied.
Well, I was going to say, I would
Right. So
hope
with
that it was
so
probably
with
like
the and by the way, there's on the website. There's actually on the DOB website. There's actually a downloadable spreadsheet with 286,000 some odd rows that lists every single building that requires a Local Law 152 inspection. Because one families are not required. Of course, vacant land's not required. Two families are not required. And there are some mixed-use buildings, like those, retail on the first floor and 2 apartments on the second floor. They're the tax class S0, S1, and S2. Somehow, miraculously, over the last 6 or 7 months, those also now showed up as not being required to do Local Law 152. So some people might have did it in the first cycle, but they don't have to do it in the second.
right. So the law has evolved. Or
Yeah,
the
so whenever I get a
interpretation
building
of it.
like that, I always look it up to make sure, and I've told a lot of people, you don't have to do it. And they're thrilled. There's another distinction, too.
versus them saying, no, just do it anyway because I want to make sure I
Right,
don't
and they're
have
like,
any gas
I
leaks
called
in my
somebody else, and they said, they told me how much, and they were going to come do it tomorrow. And I'm like, well, now you don't have to do it at all.
Right.
And then, and if they're a little leery about that, I just say, well, we'll send an email to the Department of Buildings. They got a special local law email that you can send to.
And say-
and I'll send it, and I'll copy them, and I'll say, this is classified as an S1. Is it exempt? And you get an email back, yes, it is. And now that person has it in writing if they ever.
Right, they have.
Yeah, right, exactly. Another distinction is 3 families. So there are a lot of 3-family dwellings that are classified as a Department of Finance tax class 3-family dwelling that have COs or what they call HPD I cards,
Yeah,
right?
of course, yeah.
For 2 unit. And those are exempt. So a lot of people, just because the Department of Finance says 3-family, you're going out and doing them.
But the I-card is 2.
But the I card is 2. So what I do is whenever I see a 3-family, which is the tax class CO,
Right, you go to HPD and you check the I-card.
I go to the HPD and look for the I card, and on DOB BIS you can look at the certificate of occupancy.
Of course.
Right, and if I see in either case that there's a 2-family, we actually email the Department of Buildings, we copy the owner, and they say no, it's exempt. They don't have to do it. So then that person
Right,
just
so those
saved.
are like all the little pieces of how the laws get
Right, and that's
enacted,
why it's
how they get-
important. That's why it's important that there is some kind of consultative approach to this.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Right, and I could see how so many people will just call a local plumber, and the plumber says you
Which
need
is
it.
fine.
Which is fine,
is
but,
fine.
but sometimes they really don't.
Right, and there are, and actually there are a lot of plumbers that don't even want to touch local law
Oh, no,
152.
a lot of
We
plumbers.
have actually plumbers that refer us.
Right, because they don't want to do it.
Because they don't want to do it. And I understand why they don't want to do it. Because they don't want to go into a 100-unit condo, right, and have there be a problem and have the gas be shut off, and then they're the bad guy.
Right, and I think that I also think that the way you're approaching it, in the detail of how you approach it, you're talking about C of O, iCards. Most plumbers, and I don't mean that about plumbers, they do plumbing. You've taken this part of this law and said, it's not just the physical inspection part. There's this consulting part.
Right.
It's a different dynamic, and kudos to you, because
Well, thank you.
I can only imagine if there were other local laws that you would work on, right? Like
This one's enough.
right, and that's exactly my point.
And I have a deep understanding of a lot of them, but then I also have the people that are doing for that local law what I'm doing for this local law.
Correct.
So people will come to me and they will say, "Oh, what do you know about lead inspections, right? Or what do you know about this local law 157
Right, the
with
same
the gas
thing we did
detectors?" And I go,
asbestos back in the day.
"Well, this is what I understand about it, but in order to do something, you got to talk to the expert."
Exactly.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, so when you look at lead stuff, there's always someone that old school in my Rolodex, and I'm sure you have someone.
Well, I actually have Lou Environmental. They've been on my podcast twice. September 2022 with Lee Wasserman. He was the owner at that time, and now he's more of a figurehead of the evolving organization. And then Greg Kruger, who's actually been with the company for over 20 years, and he's an engineer, and he really understands the nuts and bolts of it.
Right.
And he was on my podcast in October of last year.
Right, to talk about what the city wants, what the
Right.
state wants,
Right.
and again, like a lot of asbestos laws and lead laws, there's city laws, there's state laws, there's federal laws,
Right.
they're all different. So once again,
Right.
you need a subject matter expert who specializes in what we do.
Right.
So,
Well, can I make one point?
Sure.
So when my brother and I first started talking about this, I mean, my brother's the pipe whisperer.
right.
He knows plumbing like he can go into a building, and I've seen it. He goes into a building, it's almost like the pipes are talking to him.
Yeah, well,
all right?
they
he
just
knows
have
exactly
so
what
much
to do.
experience.
But he doesn't understand the real estate side of it,
No.
and I don't understand the plumbing side of it.
Right.
So
That's
together,
why I'm saying I think it's a fabulous idea.
Right. There were certain
Unions.
types of fittings during the first 4-year cycle that if you had them, you had to have them removed. And that created a problem.
Sure.
Because if you had a union, a bushing, a
Right.
plug T,
Yeah,
or
the two big ones that I had in the buildings I owned,
right,
another plumber came in and put a coupling in, and he put a bushing in. And
Right.
then my cousin, who's a licensed plumber, he was doing some work. He's like, "Sis, we got to back all this out."
right,
I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, they used the wrong fittings."
right. So what happens now is in the first 4-year cycle, you have to remove that. Now, let's say, for instance, that plug T or that bushing or that union is on a line which goes to the 4th floor of an 8-family building. Well, you have to do a pressure. You have to file an LAA. You
Right.
have to do a pressure test, right? And by the way, there's no pressure test in Local Law 152.
Right. It's only if you
only if you need to do some work. So you have to pressure test that. Well, it's a 60, 70, 80-year-old building.
it's never going to hold.
Right. So it doesn't hold. Now you got to replace the pipe from the meter all the way to
up.
the
Right,
appliance.
now you got to open up the shafts. You got to open everything up.
Right.
It's a
You got to go
disaster.
behind the right. So that becomes very expensive. So what happened is in October 2023, the city council, alongside the Plumbing Foundation and the Master Plumbers Council, they crafted a bill that would actually change it to be called a non-hazardous
repair.
abnormal operating condition, which is an AOC. That's a terminology that's used in plumbing. And even though the bill hasn't passed yet, in 2024, early in 2024, the Department of Building started to adopt that
piece.
approach. So now what we do is if we see one of these things, we take a picture of it, we send it to the Department of Buildings,
And you
Local Law
report it
152.
for that building.
And no, we don't identify the building.
Oh, okay.
And we say, Douglas M. Weidner, licensed plumber 1901, went on an inspection on so-and-so date and saw this. Can it remain or does it have to be removed?
And they make the call.
And they always say, if it wasn't hazardous at the time of the inspection, you don't have to do it.
Oh, wow.
And now we just note it on the GPS one, and we indicate that we made this query to the Department of Buildings, that it's there, and if you ever work on the line, you will have to bring it to code.
Got it. Makes sense.
Yeah, and that's actually saving people a lot of money. The other thing is that there was no fines for the first 4-year cycle. So if you did it and you had work to do, you didn't get a fine if you didn't do the work. And if you didn't do it at all, you didn't get a fine.
But now
in the second cycle, they've made it very, very clear, and they've sent out notices to everyone. They're calling them notices of deficiency, NOD, and they're specifically saying, and those actually now are filed in DOB under the violations for gas piping. And they're basically saying there's no civil penalty if you do it in the second cycle when you're supposed to.
Okay, great. So as we wrap up the show, first of all, thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
But part of our show is at the end of every show, my good friend Andrew Peters from Curry and Brown, he's a cost estimator. And on one of the very first episodes that we had, he talks about projecting costs of things without having anything. Sometimes a university comes to him and says, hey, we want to build a lab that's 10,000 square feet. How much is it going to cost? He has no plans. He has nothing. So he uses history and forecasting. And his line always is, the rear view mirror is this big, but the windshield is that big. So as we talk about local law 152, and clearly you're a subject matter expert, I've never really had anyone talk to me about gas inspections at the level that you have. Where do you think the city takes the law in cycle 3? You know about cycle 1, you know about cycle 2, and you've been in this world now. So, and it's just a subjective projection. Where do you think it goes next?
Well, cycle 3 doesn't start till 2028.
Right, but that's around the corner in construction. We're in 2025. It's here.
I can't even believe we're in business 5 years, right? So, and that's not even 5 years from now.
Right.
Here's what I hope would happen, right?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, this is what I hope would happen. That intro 0429 2023, which is the bill that I talked about before.
Yeah, about the fittings.
That passes, and that it becomes part of the law that you have these abnormal operating conditions.
Much more clarity.
And then maybe the plumber can make that determination without having to go to the Department of Buildings. Yeah, exactly. So there's clarity. And that's a key word with all local laws, is sometimes there's a lack of clarity. So the more clarity would be the better. That it does go to DOB now. So this way, if someone
buys... they need the portal to get integrated.
Right. So this way, if someone buys a building, they can go to DOB now and see, was the local law 152
they don't have to go to
inspection
15 different places to find it.
Well, you have to email them with the block and the lot and the bin number.
If they get back to you.
Right. So you want to be able to know that it's going to happen. Now, one of the distinctions of that introduction that I told you about with City Council is they are talking about extending the scope of the inspection to all the exposed gas piping up to any gas utilization equipment in the building except for in residential apartments. So what that means is you got a restaurant and you got gas piping going in the restaurant. And they have their own hot water heater. Maybe they have their own boiler. And that was in the tenant space, which was not included up to this point. Right. That would be included. So that would increase the cost for buildings that are mixed use or 100%.
Passing the liability onto the licensed plumber.
Right. But the thing is if you're going to have a problem, it's probably in the commercial part of a building where the problem is going to exist as opposed to the residential problem. So maybe that's a good thing, and it makes buildings safer. And we don't have a repeat of what happened in the East Village and also in Harlem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, this was incredibly informative. If anyone needs to know anything about gas piping, you could always reach out to me, but you could always reach out to Bill, and we'll get you in contact with him. KeepMyGas.com.
Well, it could be KeepMyGas.com, but it could also be KeepMyGas.nyc. And if you go to .com, it'll go to NYC. But it could also be LL152.com or LL152.nyc. And always feel free to go to the website. You can contact me through the contact form. I have my phone number there, my email address, and I look forward to talking with you soon.
But as we know, there's only one place to find Sisto Says, and it's Sisto Says at YouTube. So thanks, everyone, for watching.
This has been amazing. Thank you so much,
Bill,
Sisto.
Thank you for taking some time out to spend some time with me.